Hey guys, it's Mark. Just out for a walk today. There goes Meals on Wheels. Wonder who they're delivering and what kind of yummy food they're delivering today. Just out for a walk today. Thought I'd talk about something that's been on my mind regarding introverted thinking and the traditional, more extroverted thinking type activity that INTJs lean toward. And the thing about extroverted thinking is that it's very much biased, and extroverted thinkers, I should say in general, if you look at ENTJs, ESTJs, these are people who are really, their psychology biases them toward outside thought, and INTJs are much the same. In fact, you can find a lot of INTJs out kind of rummaging around on the internet for new things to learn, new books to read, new, if they could just find that one. I say if they, I should say if we. I do the same thing. I mean, it's not like you're gonna, completely eliminate this from your life, and that's not really well advised. But to balance it out is a good idea. But if we can just find that one idea, that one thing that we can learn that the other guy doesn't know, or if it's that one thing that we can learn that gives us the super high leverage, and you probably know that word. I remember somebody said the INTJs use the word leverage a lot, and that's really true because it's like a metaphor, and we think in metaphor, even if we don't realize it, we do. But the downside to this is that if you rely too much on other people's thinking, really you are letting other people do your thinking for you. And the kind of, the deal in the INTJ's mind is usually something like, well, but they've done a lot of thinking, and maybe it takes me 1/10 of the time to learn what they've thought up that it did to, for them to think it up. So in other words, you're putting in less energy and getting more out as a, kind of a ratio. However, there are some huge downsides to that. And really a big one is, in this example I was thinking about, I went down to and it has a lot to do with energy. I've been talking a lot about energy lately, and it's a huge consideration for INTJs to pick up on. But I'll try and explain what I mean. Back in the 1990s, when I was a teenager, my dad and I used to go to hobby shops. And remember, he was an INTJ too, so we liked to go to the same sorts of places and do the same sorts of things in general. And we went to the hobby store, and he and I, oh, that's nice. Got some nice river flow today. River, creek, whatever. Around here it's like a raging torrent of a river, but this is California, so. He and I went to this hobby store, and we were both into wargaming and strategy games, things like that. And I was just barely starting to get really interested in these, and I saw one there that was it was like the raid on Arnhem, the bridge too far in World War II. And as I picked up this game, just the idea of it really seized me, and I got into it right there in the store. I was just like, wow, this is awesome. And if you know much about war games, there's like war games that use miniatures, like little guys that you move around on a table or something like that. And those are cool, but you have to use usually use like a measuring stick, something like that. And this was a hex encounter. We call them hex encounter war games. Hex encounter, you don't have to use a measuring stick. I just hiked up a little hill there, sorry, out of breath. But you don't have to use a measuring stick. What you use is the hex map itself to measure out, how far for distance and where things are going. So I like the idea. I personally was really interested in that at first, and then as I kind of looked it over, it looked like it was going to be a really, kind of a fun thing to pick up on, to try out, to experience. And my dad looked at it and he thought it was cool too. I mean, he was a captain in the Army and in the US Army, and was really into, he was, you know, raised during World War II, and he was really into anything military. Not so much because he was a violent guy, which he wasn't really at all, but he was very much, you know, seized by that metaphor, and that was kind of his upbringing. So it kind of picked him, so to speak. And so as we you know, got home, unwrapped this war game, it was hilarious. It had, like, the map was huge on this war game, and it was these tiny little hexes, you know, hexagon shapes on the map. And just looking at it, you felt like you were gonna, like, prepare for a battle yourself. And let me see how much time is left here. Okay, so I'm about 6 minutes in. But then when I got poking out the little cardboard pieces, the little counters to put on the map, there were like hundreds of those things. And they were really cool. There were tanks and little guys, and I think airplanes too, and just amazing. And then I got to the instructions, and it was like tiny print, and just blew me away. And I went into I had a bedroom. I got lucky and had the bedroom with the walk-in closet in our house. And so there was some random storage stuff that my dad put in there, but I'd go in there when I'd get like a new cool thing. Sometimes I'd go into this little closet and flip on the light and shut the door and just kind of geek out, you know, privately. And so I had it all laid out in my bedroom there, in my closet there. And all I could do was like look at it, feel it, and I was just seized by the vibe of it, right? The intuitive kind of like, wow, this is awesome. But then when it came down to playing it, my dad and I sat down and he just started laughing. He's like, I think this is probably too complex for us. And I didn't want to admit that because it was like my game, right? And I was like so blown away by it. It had to be the right thing for us. But the more I looked through the rules, the more I felt like I don't know where to even start. And I just instinctively found myself just putting the rules aside and doing something else. And so he came up, he said, you know, what if we did this? He's like, we got dice here. You be this, you pick out your troops and I'll pick out mine, and I'll be the Germans and you be the British, and we'll play it that way. We'll just you know, play it with dice and make it really simple. And at the time I thought that was totally ridiculous. Like, but that's not even really playing the game. That's not how the game works. But he was more open and flexible with the idea of just kind of making up our game. And if I could go back in time, that's the one thing I would have done that I've learned very recently is that even though it starts simple, everything starts simple. And I was turned off by the idea that our rules would never be as complex and as cool and allowing as many things as this game, the game rules did. But the trade-off was the time it took to learn it, and the motivation suck that this thing was, that it drained our energy just to try and play it. So it wasn't, by definition, it wasn't playable for us. And since then, as I've got back into wargaming and you know, kind of done a mix of learning other people's games and developing my own, I've really found that while it's worth it to learn other people's stuff, that can safely, in most cases, become a background process that you just do when you have time, little by little. But it is by definition, in the Jungian sense, it's extroversion. And it takes a critical toll on our psychology to be too caught up in that. And extroversion is not only, you know, extroversion is this, not just this social aspect. I've talked about this on the blog before, but it's also this engagement with new things and things outside of you, things that you didn't come up with by yourself. And for an introvert, that's hard to do. Your brain is more conditioned, I think, from an early age to know and to do your own stuff, to develop your own thing. And for INTJs, a big part of that is inventing your own thing. And it's very, very hard for INTJs. We use extroverted thinking in the negative sense, in the sense that we look for other people who aren't referring to the correct idea or the latest, coolest, most effective idea. And so it can be hard then ourselves to go and kind of invent our own little stupid idea that's really simple and a, you know, as a friend of mine says, shitty first draft. That can be really kind of a frustrating block, mental block to get by. But what I found is if I can get that first draft out there and just kind of kick it around and think of it as a version 0.1 or whatever, pretty soon I've made enough inroads that my thing has now a good chance of being cooler and more effective and more fun to people like me, right, at least, than that other guy's thing that he made that I was trying to learn. And I found this over and over again. And recently, as I've been designing my own shorthand language or shorthand writing method, I found that as I compile all my notes, I'm like, you know what? I can make this whatever I want it to be. And that's really cool by itself. But also, I can make it speak to every problem that I kind of foresee it. My intuition says, hey, it's going to have this problem in this way because it's brand new. And I can speak to that right in the design of the document. And that's been really, really cool. So I encourage you to give that invention process a try. Don't look at it as I'm going to do my own thing and it's going to be worse than what other people have put lots of time into. Think of it as I'm going to do my own thing and it's going to be easier for me to wrap my brain about because it's my own thing. And also over time, I'm going to add on to it to the degree that I can even make it cooler than the thing the other person came up with, because it's really true. You got to trust yourself, but it's really, I've found that that's really a true principle. So just some thoughts on that. It's been a lot of fun to realize also how much money this can save on buying books, buying games, buying other people's stuff, right? And you can even start to kind of develop your own stuff and publish it in whatever way makes sense to you. Maybe it's something you give away for free, maybe it's something you charge for, who knows? But it becomes part of your portfolio, so to speak. And so that's a huge deal. So just some thoughts on that kind of introverted thinking method of doing, inventing it, thinking it up by yourself versus the extroverted thinking method of, you know, kind of using and organizing other people's ideas and pulling those together and kind of relying on the outside ideas. So this has been my first kind of video blog for the website. I hope it works well. I've tried to keep the camera pointed at my face. I hope it hope it's been interesting and worthwhile for you guys. We'll see how this goes. All right, take care. Bye-bye.